Hello, this is Gonzalo Lira speaking to you live, and this is the Roundtable number 24. And my guest today is Shaun Attwood. Shaun, how's it going? Great to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal, Gonzalo. Huge congratulations on your YouTube success, and I am honored
Oh,
to be on your channel. Much appreciated.
it's my pleasure, man. For those of you who don't know, Shaun Attwood is obviously British. He's in London right now, and he lived in the United States for a while, and he became somewhat notorious for being the Walter White of ecstasy. And he got into serious trouble, and he went to prison. And he after that he was deported back to the UK, and he started doing a YouTube channel that is I'm a huge fan. It's really interesting and fascinating your point of view on so many things, and so yeah, the breadth of knowledge is phenomenal, and it's just a pleasure having you on. And before we get started, what I really want to talk about is what the hell is going on in the UK, because the UK seems like the economy is tanking. Liz Truss is not even a week as prime minister, and they're already talking about getting rid of her. What the hell is that all about?
So, I have had an unusual journey through capitalism, and when I was at the University of Liverpool, my professor was Sir Patrick Minford, and he was Margaret Thatcher's chief economic advisor. Now, Liz Truss has just resurrected Sir Patrick Minford from retirement to give her economic advice. He's a hardcore monetarist.
Hmm.
And when I was a kid, I'd watched Wall Street, greed is good, that kind of thing, and that became my mantra. But I had to learn the hard way that money isn't the meaning of life.
No.
And being incarcerated in Arizona, like you mentioned earlier, really made me reflect on that.
Hmm.
So the economy here, inflation is at a record high. The pound is almost at parity with the dollar, and the people who are living in poverty or on the border, of survival here, because it's approaching the winter now, the energy bills are just going up astronomically. So it's estimated that all these people are going to be making a choice between food or heat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, what the hell, man? I mean, like, can I ask you, if you don't mind telling us, what's your usual energy bill, and what do your bills now look like?
Okay, so I live on my own and I'm on the road a lot and I don't really use the heat. Even prior to this, I just bought myself a mohair sweater. My brain thinks faster when things are cold. I'm always hot for some reason.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
So, my energy bill is probably not a good yardstick to go by. I mean, they just sent me an email the other day saying that it's going up, but it's not going to go up as much as the government is allowing us to take it up.
Hmm.
So I think I'm looking at almost £2,000 a
Hang on a second.
year.
Hello? Sorry about that. I had a little accident because I wanted to move to the terrace so I can smoke cigarettes. Because right before the broadcast started, right as we were starting, the air raid siren went off, and I couldn't go to the terrace to smoke cigs to start the broadcast. But now the air raid siren is off, and so here we are. So anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you, man. What were you saying?
Yeah, so I think mine, they just notified me that it's going up to almost £2,000 a year. And
And how much was it before?
I'm just a person living on his own. I can't if you've got a family or if you're like old people and you need that heat on, it's going to go absolutely insane for those people. I think I was paying about just over 100 and something a month, and now it's almost doubling.
100 a year. Oh, it's almost doubling. Oh, I see what
100
you
a
mean.
month.
And
100 a
so
month.
I mean, like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's basically doubling. And I'm thinking to myself, a working family of four, £2,000, assuming that it's the same that you're paying, they can't afford that. I mean, it's too much.
There's no
What are they going
way.
to do?
If you've got a family and you're trying to heat a whole house and feed everybody and do all the laundry and everything else, then you know it's going to take food off people's table. That's what they're scared of in this country, and they reckon that it's going to cause people to die.
Yeah, yeah. I heard that one in seven Brits of the retirees, one in seven retirees in the UK will not have enough money for heating this winter. and you're going to have a lot of frozen grannies by March, man. I mean, I'm making light of it, but it's no laughing matter. I mean, these poor people, there's no way for them to make some money because they're elderly, they're on a pension. They're screwed. I think that this is catastrophic.
Look, I've interviewed David Icke about 5 times now, and it's from him I learned that the people at the top of politics are absolute mass murdering psychopaths. They have no scruples whatsoever. So they've not let this crisis pertaining to the war, I don't know if we can go into that because of the risk to your channel, but they've not let this crisis go to waste. I mean, if you look at the trajectory of oil prices, they've gone right back down. I know gas is still lingering up there, but everything is just jacked up to the max to squeeze every last drop of blood out of the taxpayers. And these psychopathic politicians, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, whoever it is, the only time I ever see them on TV, because I don't watch TV anymore, it's when I go to my parents' house. They're in the 70s. They got the BBC on ITV, and I see these politicians on the TV looking like stuffed corpses, spewing their fake slogans, but behind the scenes, just screwing the public over. It just makes me absolutely sick. And what David Icke told me, there's never been more truth in that about the people who rise to the politics. You've got to be a psychopath.
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, like, their behavior is psychopathic. And the thing that has completely wigged me out this morning, that I don't know if you heard this, but the Nord Stream pipelines that go from Russia to Germany, that were, that because of the sanctions, there was no gas flowing, but there was a possibility that they would start flowing again. The Russians even offered to open up Nord Stream 2, if the Germans changed their minds about sanctions. Well, they got blown up. I mean, like, in both of them, all of a sudden, the people monitoring it said that the pressure dropped from, I don't know how much it was, like 300 pounds per square inch to 7. It just like collapsed, right? And both of the pipelines. I mean, and apparently there were 3 separate incidents of sabotage, one in Nord Stream 2 and 2 in Nord Stream 1. And, now that's off the table. The Germans, apparently, because of the damage from seawater, to repair that is going to be like months. I mean, months, perhaps a year. I mean, it's not a weekend fix. And so all of a sudden, these poor people in Germany, even if the government of Germany is sort of like decided, hey, let's make nice with the Russians, they're not going to be able to get gas. There's no way for them to get gas. And it looks to me that the Americans did it. What do you think?
Look, all the false flag operations around the world mostly get traced back to intelligence out of America, the CIA, Black Ops. I mean, I've written extensively about the Bush crime family, the Clinton crime family, Barry Seal. I wrote a book about him, Who Killed Barry Seal, George H.W. Bush or Pablo Escobar. And it just absolutely blew my mind that these psychopathic leaders can be orchestrating a war on drugs on one side, telling the public, yeah, we know we're putting these villains behind bars. Well, they've got CIA pilots like Barry Seal and Terry Reid flying the cocaine into the country, spawning the crack epidemic in LA, proliferating weapons across Los Angeles, and profiting from both sides. And then all these people end up in prison. And this is, my activism started in the jail. My writing was smuggled out. Mm-hmm. And it was just seeing what was actually going on inside America's jails and prisons just blew my mind to how the world is really being operated, because they're telling the public, the prison it's all psychopaths and serial killers and murderers and rapists. The height of the war on drugs, weed possession was the highest arrest category. I saw young people getting 2 to 5 years of weed possession, and every young person they snatched, the jails got $60,000 per year of taxpayers' money. And those contracts right now are in the tens of billions a year. And it doesn't matter which political party wins the election, the political contributions from the private prisons in the tens of millions a year, so they keep those contracts rolling. So it's the land of the free has got 1 in 100 adults in prison right now. And the UK is following in their footsteps, because our psychopathic leaders are clicked up with your psychopathic leaders. Whatever you do with prison policy, we're 5 to 10 years behind. Let's just mass incarcerate people, allow it to be drug and gang infested mayhem so they don't rehabilitate, give them $50 on the door so they have a nice day when they get released, and they come right back. As soon as they come right back, $60,000 more of the taxpayers' money to the jail per year, per person.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good gig if you can get it. Actually, I saw a YouTube channel where a guy who was some sort of like investor, he bought a private prison, and he was telling, the financials. They were astounding, and I've done some investing myself, and I was thinking, yeah, that's a pretty good damn deal. Return on investment was like 12 to 15%, per year. Hey, I can get behind that. Let's put more people in prison and sell our souls for a few more shekels, Jesus.
It gets more even devious than that. So you've got these major investment houses investing on one side in the private prisons and investing on the other side in the music that's going out, telling young people to kill cops, to deal drugs, and to commit crimes. So you've got this pipeline to these young people right into the prison industrial complex. It is absolutely obscene.
Yeah, and it's like a money-making venture everywhere you look. And it's not just the prisons, it's not just the military industrial complex, it's everything. It's like almost every single institution in our democracies, or so-called democracies, is a money-making scam of some sort or another. You look at education. It's 4 years of basically summer camp where you take the dumbest goddamn courses, and you have to pay an arm and a leg and go into debt slavery. And because of that, you graduate with so much debt at 22 that you can't afford to buy your own home. You can't afford to start a family. And so you're just struggling to get by, and you pay for 10 years and you check the balance. And sometimes it's more than when you started. It's like, we are cows being milked perpetually. Would that be a fair assessment of the situation? Milked and then slaughtered.
What kind of curring society has its young people drowning in debt before they've even entered the workplace?
Yeah.
It is absolutely obscene. Yet we tend to bomb the poorest countries in the world at a cost of multi-billions of dollars to the taxpayers, and squeeze every last drop of that out of the taxpayers' money so that people like Halliburton, Dick Cheney, the Bush crime family, Clinton crime families can all make money from it.
Biden crime family. Don't
Biden crime family. Yep.
Oh, by the way, just a little parentheses. You've seen all the stuff from the Hunter Biden laptop, all those, snorting cocaine off of hookers' asses and shit like that. I mean, you've seen all that, right?
I've seen some of it because I had Ryan Dawson on, and Ryan Dawson introduced me to some of it. He's been banned from everywhere. And again, it's just the utter hypocrisy of the system. These elites like Prince Andrew can do whatever they want, completely untouchable. He's never going to end up in a prison yard getting stabbed in the belly by the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang for being a chomo, like anyone else would who had committed crimes of that nature. We'd all be SWAT teamed and we have some massive bail bond upon us and be suffering the consequences. So it's an absolute double standard that people like that can just be walking around free, while other people who've committed much less offenses, such as, I've written a series of books about the war on drugs, and I went to the Hemp Museum in Holland to research it, and they had all these pictures on the wall, these people. I'm like, I'm curious about them. They said even though in America they've legalized and decriminalized in many states, under 3 strikes laws, these people are still serving 25 to life for weed possession.
For a trivial amount, I take it.
For a trivial amount of drugs, because you got prisons guards unions. For example, let's go to the 3 strikes law in California. The prison guards union made $1 million contribution to get that introduced. It got introduced, and he didn't even have to do 3 violent crimes. So you had people in the California state prison system stealing a $10 pizza, serving 25 years at $60,000 a year, millions and millions of dollars at the taxpayer expense. And the taxpayers, they woke up to this and they said, hold on a minute, we've got to look into this and take some action to repeal it. So when they tried to repeal it, a wall of money came up, And again, that money came from the Prison Guards Union of California, and also Broadcom, exclusive provider of telephone services to the California state prison system. You make one call from the state prison locally, it's like $5 or $10 for 5 minutes. They charge your family. I called from the UK, from Arizona, to my parents in England. It was like 60, 70 pounds, $80, $90 for that 5 minutes. So all these industries around the prisons, not just the guards, not just the private prisons, there's hundreds of contractors, and it's billions and billions a year. And that wall of money is still lobbying to this day to tighten drug laws and throw young people in prison for weed possession, to tighten sentences. It's absolutely psychopathic and sickening.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, chat, so that you know, in the description below is a link to Shaun's channel, and that's where you can find links to his books. I take it that they're in the about part of your page. They can find links to your books, right?
Yeah, all my books are under my name, Shaunatt Wood. I've written about Who Killed Epstein, Prince Andrew or Bill Clinton. But that one is my latest one. I've got part 2 coming out soon. And I just want a huge thank you, to all the viewers out there on my YouTube channel, because I lost my channel twice over my Epstein coverage. And the Epstein coverage came...
What specifically about your Epstein coverage that did they clip you for?
All right, this is complex, so let me just give you the full timeline. So, several weeks before Epstein was suicided, actually, when Epstein was arrested, my channel primarily was a prison channel. My prison blog was started in 2004, and my prison YouTube channel was started in 2007. I think they were the first prison blog and prison YouTube channel. So I got released in December 2007, and it was all prison stories. Epstein got arrested, and a viewer sent a question: what do you think is going to happen to Epstein now that he's been arrested? Well, because of my research on the Clinton crime family, I reckon that he's going to be found having committed suicide, but he will actually have been murdered. So when that happened, then it all just went ballistic on my channel. All these people started watching the Epstein coverage. And over the course of a couple of years, we interviewed everyone at the tip of the spear on it. Survivors like Maria Farmer, people like Whitney Webb, Ryan Dawson, Charlie Robinson, Ari Ben Menashe, who'd been deep in the mix with Maxwell Sr. And I'd wake up every morning, do a video on Epstein. It'd have hundreds of thousands of views overnight. So we had 60 million views on that subject. It became half of the channel. And that's when the strikes came in. And oh boy, did they come in. Like, it started off slow at first, and then it was like, ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. I ended up getting about 40 major strikes, all pertaining to Epstein coverage, all under the classification of cyber bullying.
But he's dead.
Yeah, well, I was cyberbullying Prince Andrew. I was cyberbullying Maxwell.
Ghislaine, I've never known how to pronounce her name. Ghislaine Maxwell.
It's Ghislaine.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks. Yeah. Look, what I know for a fact is that Robert Maxwell was in deep with Israeli intelligence. He'd been running guns back in '48, early on in the history of Israel. And when he died in '91, or was probably murdered, thrown off a boat, right? As I understand it, 6 current and former heads of Israeli intelligence services showed up at his funeral. So he was neck deep. And in '91, when he was killed or suicided or died, or however you want to call it, Ghislaine was a grown woman. So she would have been plugged into that whole crowd. And so my thinking has been, and you correct me when I'm wrong, because I haven't really been following this case that closely, because I have a sense of what it is. And my sense is Ghislaine was probably his handler. What I know for a fact from people I know in finance is that bullshit that he ran money for people. He was supposed to be this big billionaire, and he was supposed to be like somebody who managed people's money. Bullshit, because there were no, he had no counterparties. He had no dealer broker. And so what money was he managing? Because when you're dealing with tens of millions of dollars and up, you leave a big paper trail, okay? For obvious reasons, just to make sure that the trades are accurate, and that the money just doesn't vanish or gets whatever. You know, it's a big deal in terms of paper, and there was no paper for him. And people telling me when Epstein first blipped on the horizon, they were telling me this guy is not who he claims to be because there's no trace of him on Wall Street or the city. There's nothing. So whose money is he managing? How does he afford this lifestyle? Bullshit. And my thinking has always been that he was basically a Mossad asset who was being used systematically to gather compromising material on influential / famous people. That's been my conclusion. Is that what you would you agree with that or disagree, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Epstein-Maxwell honey trap operation was part of a nexus of these operations that go back decades. Whitney Webb has done a brilliant analysis on that. Robert Maxwell, the dad of Ghislaine, he was involved with nearly all the intelligence agencies across the world. He could sit down with the leaders of Russia, the UK, the US, like that. And he had relationships with the cartels, the Yakuza out of Japan. He was laundering money through Bulgaria. He had the Bulgarian government in his pocket. And analyzing crime and true crime, I do have a begrudging, I'm mesmerized slightly by his ability to pull all of this off, because I've never seen such a complex spider web of corruption woven through governments and criminals and cartels and intelligence agencies, and one person at the center of it. Now, with Epstein, he was nowhere near in the league of Robert Maxwell. I mean, our interview with Maria Farmer, she said that Leslie Wexner was the head of the snake for the US operation that Epstein was a mid-level manager of with Maxwell. And it wasn't even Epstein who had that black book. That black book was Ghislaine Maxwell's black book, because she was the socialite. She had all of the contacts. He was the guy with the money. And the very beginning, everyone well, where's he got this money from? So there was the Tower financial fraud with Hoffenberg, who was just mysteriously found dead last month. Then there was Black.
Shocker.
Yeah. Then there was Black, gave him a couple of $100 million for financial advice, which was about a quarter of his net worth. And then Wexner gave him this property for free. The property was worth tens of millions, and it already had cameras installed into it before Epstein moved in. So it was part of him sliding into this honey trap operation. The money was given to him, and then he was out there to compromise the most powerful people in the world. And one of his aces in the holes was Prince Andrew, because he'd already been convicted of these heinous crimes against kids. If he could get Prince Andrew on his side, that was just an absolute signal to the world elites that he was the man to go to, so he could continue doing these heinous things against kids. And we saw Jean-Luc Brunel, who procured over 1,000 girls for him. Virginia Guthrie cited in the legal paperwork against Andrew that there was an orgy on the paedophile island that Andrew Maxwell and Jean-Luc Brunel participated in. They were joking that these girls were East European. They couldn't speak any English. They were the easiest ones to do these heinous things to. And Jean-Luc Brunel also, Epstein boasted that he slept with 12-year-old triplets that Jean-Luc Brunel sent him as a birthday present. And then we saw Jean-Luc Brunel get suicided at the end of last year as well. In the French prison system, he was hung.
Yeah, they always get suicided. And it's always at these perfect moments, perfectly timed suicides, and it's always like, the story I heard about Epstein himself was that basically he had started off as a math teacher at the Spence School, which is a fairly prestigious school. And somehow from there, he got a job at Bear Stearns, which was an investment bank. How the hell does that happen? Okay, I mean that's not your typical career path. Okay, and from there he went off on his own to quote unquote manage money. And the thing is, again, at Bear Stearns, people who were aware of him said he wasn't doing anything. He was just basically hanging out. And the how can I put it? The inference that I draw is that the guy was a pedo. And he gravitated to the Spence School, as a lot of pedos do. They gravitate to where the targets are. And he must have been caught or something. And somebody realized, hey, this guy could potentially be our guy, our middle manager who can run this honeypot. And the fact is that the Israelis have done honeypots like this before. Back in Syria in the 50s, I forget the name of the guy. There was a guy who, or Lebanon or Syria, something like that, that he was running a honeypot, and he was bringing in all kinds of politicians to get compromising information on them. And he was blown out and discovered and executed. But the Israelis, they named a street after him. In fact, Sacha Baron Cohen wanted to make a movie about him. I don't know if that movie is still in the works. And basically glorifying creating a honeypot where you exploit all these poor girls. And of course, the issue becomes, nowadays we've become, as a society, so frankly, we've become so decadent that, fucking some 25-year-old isn't enough. It has to be somebody underage. And I guess, I mean, that's my thinking, that was their mode of thinking, that we have identified a potential middle manager, we'll set him up, we'll get these teenage girls and get all kinds of compromising information for our benefit so that we can blackmail these people and get them to do what we want them to do, including changing foreign policy, all kinds of things that you can do when you have that kind of compromising information on a lot of important people. I mean, and that's basically the story we're telling here. Is that correct?
Yes, Epstein monetized his own perverted tendencies. And by pulling people in and getting them to engage in this heinous activity, he was able to leverage that power and control over them as part of this honey trap operation. Now, if you look at other massive honey trap operations, such as the Kincora Boys Home in Ireland, you could trace that back to Lord Mountbatten, who was, King Charles's mentor here. And we've had Andrew Lowney on, the literary agent and author, and he has described all this stuff in the diaries, this activity that the royal family and the record keepers are trying to keep sealed. It was supposed to be released the other year, but they're sealing it to fully understand the extent of what Lord Mountbatten was doing to these boys. Yeah. And then you've got Jimmy Savile, who was brought in at the highest levels of the royal circles. We've got a 4-hour documentary out about Jimmy Savile called Untouchable. It's free to watch on YouTube if people want to check it out. But the Netflix stuff was a complete whitewash. I know the Netflix show at least brought in interest from America, but it was a complete whitewash.
What was not mentioned in the Netflix whitewash?
All right, so Jimmy Savile, he was given the keys to Broadmoor Hospital, which is like a prison for the criminally insane.
Oh, God.
So he was clicked up with a guy called Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. And the Yorkshire Ripper, he killed women in the north of England. He said he was doing it for God. Some of them were sex workers. But Jimmy Savile was actually brought in for questioning pertaining to victims of the Yorkshire Ripper. And then years later, he's in Broadmoor, kicking it with the Yorkshire Ripper, and they're getting along just fine. Now, he also had the keys to the corpses and to people who were really seriously, unwell, handicapped, damaged in some ways. And he would walk around the floors of these hospitals at night times. And there was many an occasion when a nurse found him interfering with somebody. And that, for example, a young girl would say, look, Jimmy's done this to me. And the nurses would say, it's just Jimmy. There's nothing we could do about it. He's raised, millions for our hospital. And that's how he got away with it. He raised tens of millions for these hospitals. And he was able to molest, access corpses. It is suspected he engaged in necrophilia. And the other reason that he was protected for so long was he threw a weekly luncheon for the West Yorkshire Police. So wherever he was in the country. For example, if he committed a crime in Surrey and there was a girls' school in Surrey where he did commit crimes at, and that got reported to the Surrey police, the protocol was then there was a contact person at West Yorkshire Police you had to follow that lead up to. And that person was coming to Jimmy Savile's weekly police lunches.
Now,
So
by the way, Shaun, before we continue, all of this that you're telling me is completely confirmed, corroborated, witnesses, written statements. I mean, this isn't just bullshit that we're spouting off about, right?
No, I mean, for us to publish this and not get sued for defamation, if people watch our documentary Untouchable, it's all experts. You know, we've interviewed the biggest true crime author in the world on it, Christopher Berry-D, journalists at the forefront of it. We interviewed one woman who, she was a dancer at a show here that I grew up on called Top of the Pops.
Mm-hmm.
And her friend at Top of the Pops ended up committing suicide. And she got pregnant, and in a diary, she'd put about having sex with Savile and other famous DJs. Jeez. And that diary was given to the police and mysteriously lost.
Yeah, of course.
So that family never ever got any justice for that heinous crime. So yeah, I mean, we've thoroughly checked all of our sources. I'm well aware now of lawsuits and litigation and defamation. Because at the height of my Epstein stuff, the coverage, I was, they were trying to shut me down every way possible. When we had 60 million views on the channel, it was the biggest thing on the channel. And all day long, it was just buzzing and we were exposing these bastards. All the ops started against me. There was black ops against me. There was hackers. I got called into the police station and I've got a caution to this day now as to how I report on sex crimes. If I interview someone who's the victim of a sex crime, there's certain questions that the police require me to ask that person now, or else I get thrown in prison. Mm-hmm. So it all happened at the same time. And then my channel got shut down. And here's the thing: when you start to expose the most deviant, elite people in the world, you'd think the whole world would be behind you. But all of a sudden, all these entities come out of the woodwork to try and destroy you, destroy your reputation with sick and twisted things that they come up with to wipe you out. And they, in the end, we lost the channel and we lost all those videos and we could not put them back up. And I'm no longer allowed to talk about that content on my channel.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, because the problem with monopolistic tech companies is that if it's a monopoly, it's just a single switch. And that just gets you wiped out. And the thing that's really despicable is that now you're realizing it's coming out that these tech monopolies like Twitter, like YouTube, Facebook, the government does tap them on the shoulder and say, block this. The lawsuit that Alex Berenson is carrying out against Twitter revealed this, that they were contacted by the American government to shut down Alex Berenson. Alex Berenson, for those of you who don't know, he is a former journalist for the New York Times who had a conscience. And he quit the New York Times and kept on reporting about the coup and about the shot. That's as far as we can talk about that particular topic, because I got into trouble for having a show about it. And, the government does tap them on the shoulder and say, no, you can't talk about this, and shut everybody down about this particular issue. Another thing that I can mention about these social media platforms is that there is a gang, literally a gang of trolls on Twitter that go about shutting down anybody who says anything about the war in Ukraine that goes counter to the narrative. And I'm here in Kharkov. I mean, I see the war. I understand what's going on. I keep on top of it on a daily basis because, of course, it directly affects me. And, what's being told in the mainstream media and what is allowed on social media is a fraction of what's going on. Really disturbing shit. Like, for instance, a picture emerged yesterday or a couple of days ago of a Zelensky regime force, member of his forces, stewing a human head and laughing about it. And obviously the human head was some, Russian soldier or DPR, LPR soldier. And this was true. And that got shut down. That got shut the fuck down. And That's what's going on in the West. We think that we're living in a free society. It's not free. It's not free if you can if you cannot tell the truth, or if you tell the truth, you get shut down. It's just, where do you think this is going, man?
What I've learned, Gonzalo, is that you're allowed to tell the truth until you get to a critical mass of followers. So once your channel gets so big, or you got so many followers on social media, you're getting so many views, and it's having an impact in the world, that's when they shut you down. So little channels can get away with the things that bigger channels cannot get away with. For us now, we are walking on eggshells a lot of the time. It's an absolute minefield out there. Now, I don't want to take away from the absolute life-changing opportunity YouTube has been, and I do understand that they've got their rules, they've got their advertisers and stuff like that, and we've got to accommodate that when they mandate these things in their community guidelines. So I play by the rules. I am thankful for YouTube and all the viewers for getting my channel back up, and I focus on other things that are trying to help people, who've been in prison, people who've gone through addiction issues and stuff like that, and young people. I do a lot of talks in schools for young people, scaring the living daylights out of them by telling them what happened to me in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail, in the hope that they won't get involved in drugs and crime. And that's where all my activism started, was out of Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail, because it was so extreme in the dead rats in the food, cockroaches all over us at night time, guards murdering mentally ill and blind prisoners. And I dreaded it at the time, but looking back now, I'm thankful that I went through such an intense period of my life to take me off that path of, greed is good and the stock market, and become an activist and a yoga man.
Yeah, because you started selling penny stocks, right?
Yeah, so I was raised with not much money. I'm from a little chemical manufacturing town in the northwest of England. And I would visit Arizona as a kid, and I was blown away by the swimming pools in the backyards, when the plane comes into land. And when I was 16, my aunt, she changed my date of birth in my passport, took me out nightclubbing on Camelback Road, I think it was, in Zazoo's nightclub, Central Phoenix. And she introduced me to all these beautiful American women as Paul McCartney's nephew. So all of a sudden,
so they didn't pay much attention to you.
So I'm just this normal lad from the northwest of England, where it rains a lot, and nothing special. All of a sudden, I'm in America, where there's swimming pools in backyards. Women are coming up to me thinking I'm Paul McCartney's nephew. I'm thinking, when I finish at university, I want some of this. So that's what I did. Now, have you seen that movie, Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah, sure.
For 5 years, I was a stockbroker. It started out Wolf of Wall Street-ish. They bring these power sales meetings, guys in 6 o'clock in the morning sales meeting. You're only as big as your numbers on this board for the month. Smiling brokers make the most money. Pacing brokers make the most money. If you're calling your wives, your girlfriends, other brokers are calling your clients. So I was indoctrinated into that, but there was also a lot of drugs and machoism, and it kind of warped my young mind, I would say, to the point where by 96, 97, I was grossing hundreds of thousands a year in the stock market, and I thought, right, no more rat race for me. I'm going to quit this job and just start throwing rave parties and importing ecstasy. And that was my
How the hell did that happen? How did you get your connection to import ecstasy?
All right. So my best mate from childhood, who's this massive guy who was pretty dangerous. He had red dots in his head telling him to hurt people from a very young age. When he got big in school, he started picking his school teachers up and putting them in the rubbish bins. And they had him outside raking leaves with the caretakers because they were so scared of him. When we were kids, we would sit on a tree at the top of my town, Pexhill, called the Thinking Tree, and we'd set our goals. And I said to my friend Wildman, I'm going to go to America, make $1 million in the stock market, fly you guys over. And Wildman's like, well, I'm going to prison. I've got red dots in my head telling me to hurt people. And that's what happened. He went off to prison for 5 years, and I went off to America for 5 years. He got out of prison. I was making good money, so I flew him over, and he ended up getting deported multiple times. He was classified as a menace to society by the judge. And he introduced me to a lot of the people of the night, because wherever he went, he would just take over that community. Like his door would be open all day long. Homeless people would be coming in. Native American, street walking, transgender sex workers would be coming in. They'd all be doing drugs together. Gangbangers, mafia characters. It was. I've never seen anything like it, and it was through him, because he's this big guy who would talk to anyone. That's how I established my drug connections.
Oh man, that's goddamn funny. Yeah, and like it was profitable until you got caught, I take it.
Well, it got a bit out of control. So at the peak of it, I was buying 50 to 100 pills off local dealers. Then I was buying up to 5,000 to 10,000 out of LA. Then I was shipping tens of thousands per mission from Holland through Mexico, and smuggling them over the border. And it just got out of control. You know that story arc you see in any movie like that? It's the glitz, the glamour in the beginning.
Yeah.
You make all this money. Then the heat comes in. In our case, it was Sammy the Bull Gravano's organization. They were the competitors. The feds come in as well. You know, they're filming us. They're filming license plates. And it just was downhill from there. Now, I quit a year before the SWAT team smashed my door down. Met a woman, fell in love. She said, this is dangerous. I could see, you know, all the heat was on us as well. And I thought I got away with it, but I was naive to the statute of limitations. They don't have to catch you with drugs. All it takes is someone from your past to say that they've done a drug deal with you, and they've got you. So it was a bit this big conspiracy case.
Yeah. And so how long were you, what was your sentence and how long did you serve?
So I was facing a 200-year maximum sentence. In the beginning, they classified me as a serious drug offender, which was 25 to life, and I had 10 charges. In the second year, when I asked to reduce my bail bond from 750,000, they doubled it to 1.5 million. They added 10 plus new charges, which stacked gave me a maximum sentence of 200 years. But fortunately, I had an association with some guys in the New Mexican Mafia, and they told me to use their lawyer if I ever got in real trouble. And I used their lawyer. It was $100,000, and he managed to get me a 9.5-year sentence. He was a loophole lawyer. So as a first-time non-violent drug offender, I only had to serve 6 if I agreed to be banned from America for life. So I am presently banned from America for life.
Okay, and let me ask you the obvious question. Once you decided to quit and you were living for a year the straight and narrow, as it were, right? And by the way, what were you doing during that year that you were living the straight and narrow?
So I was with my girlfriend in Scottsdale in an apartment, and I was studying Spanish at the college there, doing kickboxing classes, going to the gym, and just trying to like get my health back from over 10 years of drug addiction.
Okay. And so why didn't it occur to you? I mean, I don't know the issue of extradition, but why didn't you split back to England, or you had just enamored of the United States?
I know. I was so attached to the United States, and we were going to split to LA just before, but then the SWAT team came. And I was a bit naive as well about the cops catching me. I thought if I've quit it and there's no drugs in my house, what can they do?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you just, you hadn't thought it through, or perhaps you didn't look into the details once you had decided to quit, because you always want to quit when you're ahead in anything, right? And once you realize that moment that, oh, the next choice might be the wrong one, once you start getting nervous about it in any endeavor, it's best to say, okay, up to here. I'm good up to here. And why didn't you explore your possible options at that time once you decided to go on the straight and narrow, or you just assumed naively that you'd be fine?
Okay, I was trying to get completely back to good health, but on the weekends I was still sneaking off and taking drugs, even though I wasn't importing ecstasy anymore. So my decision-making processes were scrambled, and you don't understand that it's scrambled until you sober up. So I didn't completely sober up until the SWAT team came. And after the SWAT team came, in the weeks in the jail, this cloud lifted out of my head that I didn't know had been there for the past almost 10 years. And when that cloud lifted out of my head and I had some clarity again, and I looked back on my life, I was thinking, how on earth am I still alive? But I had to get pushed to the brink of suicidal insanity in that second year in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail, when they said I was facing 200 years and I was on the verge of slashing my wrists. But it was looking at the pictures of my mum and my sister that stopped me from doing it, because I knew she would get a call saying your son's killed himself. That was when I started to help other people, because before that, my behavior had been selfish, narcissistic, party person, getting high, getting my friends high. I hadn't been thinking about the harm I was causing society. But in the jail in that second year, I started to see the suffering of the prisoners. And the prisoners, like I said earlier, they weren't pedophiles and rapists. You know, a lot of them were people with addiction issues, low-level drug offenders. Prison is the biggest house of the mentally ill. More than half of my friends in prison were soldiers, come back from wars with PTSD, didn't get any help, so they got on street drugs to self-medicate and ended up in prison. So because I had an education, a third of them couldn't even read or write. So I would read their legal paperwork. I set up a class for the Mexicans so they could write home in Spanish, because a lot of them worked out in the countryside. They couldn't write home in Spanish. And then the last thing I did was I said to a guard, how on earth do you guys get away with all this human rights violations, the dead rats in the food, the cockroaches crawling all over us at night times? And he said, the world has no idea what's going on in here, and the public doesn't give a shit about prisoners. So something went off in my head at that moment, and with a tiny little pencil sharpened on the door, I started to write everything down. Now, my aunt, she would visit me in max security, because I couldn't put these things in the mail because they could open your mail. So in max security, I would visit my aunt would come, and she'd be behind like a plexiglass window, you know, like Silence of the Lambs when Clarice Starling meets Hannibal Lecter. So and I'm chained to a table, and I'm on a phone, but I hid what I wrote in like legal paperwork and books and letters, and gave it to the guard, and he gave it to her at the end of the visit, and she typed them up. My aunt, God bless her, she's dead now, and she emailed them to my family in Cheshire, England. And they put them online as a blog in 2004 called John's Jail Journal. And that's how all this activism started. And people could go and look at all those original blog entries. They're still up there, which documents my journey through Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail. And, you know, the activism then led to the YouTube channel, led to me speaking in schools. And it completely turned my life around, because when I was dealing the drugs, importing the ecstasy, my ego was as big as the Grand Canyon. You know, I'm Mr. Cool Guy now. I've got $1 million house on the side of a mountain. I've got my own security team. I've got a rave clothing music store. I thought I had it made, but the drugs was telling me that. It warped my value system. But once I started helping people, it put brakes on my ego, and it was good for my soul, and it launched me down this whole new life path that I'm blessed to still be on to this day.
Can I ask you a personal question? And please, this is an honest query, and I don't mean to. Do you think now? I mean, you and I are roughly the same age. You were born in '68, and I was born in February of '68. So, do you feel that under the right circumstances, you might slide back into that life? And
no, I don't.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't, because I look at it as a period of my life that I went through where I was emotionally immature. I had no common sense. I was testosterone fueled in my 20s, and just, you know, it just got more and more out of control. I surrounded myself with people who were doing equally insane behavior. And most of my male friends from back then are dead now. I lost Wildman just over a year ago, my co-host on my YouTube channel, my best friend from childhood. He was my bodyguard as well, because he was so big. And I lost him just over a year ago from multiple organ failure. From all of the damage he'd done over the years. And he quit the hard drugs because he was doing a lot of meth and crack and stuff like that, smoking them for days on end in America. But he couldn't quit alcohol and weed, and he was down to drinking liters and liters of cider every single day still. So sadly, he passed just over a year ago. But I've been around people taking drugs, and they've offered it me. And I've just laughed at them and told them a bit of my story. And I don't feel any temptation to go back to drugs at all, because I listen to people like Russell Brand, and salute to Russell Brand. He's doing a phenomenal job exposing the NWO right now on his channel. But he says things like, if I have a glass of wine, next thing I'll be down some alley smoking crack because I've got this addictive personality. Well, I've got an addictive personality, but I channel it now into fitness classes and yoga and meditation and doing talks to the school kids and all this other stuff that still, gets your adrenaline up a little bit, but it does it in a positive way. So I don't feel the wolves howling for me to go back to taking drugs in the party scene.
Yeah. No, because I wondered about that, because in my own case, I recognize that I have an obsessive personality, but not a compulsive one. And so for me, to give an example, I love gambling. and I'll go to a casino and I'll play for 3 days straight, no problem. But then I'll leave and forget about it for months, years. I haven't actually been to a casino in years because it's just sort of like when I'm there, I have to be like all in all the time. That's why I'm like smoking cigs like crazy, right? But if all of a sudden my cigs or my ability to gamble or something were taken away from me, it'd be like, oh, okay, just it's sort of like fades away. And also, I have a great good fortune that when I have like 2-3 drinks, I want to take a nap. 4 drinks, I'm going straight to bed. I just fall asleep. And so it's not. I have to admit, the only drug that I really enjoy are psychedelics. I think that psychedelics are extraordinarily useful. I was living in 2019 and 2020 in Amsterdam, and I decided consciously to go through a protocol and studied a lot. I read a really interesting book called How to Change Your Mind by a journalist called Michael Pollan. I highly recommend it. He talks about psychedelics in great detail of origins of, research into, experiences of, and all the rest of it. And I found psychedelics to be incredibly useful in understanding yourself. And that's why I like it, because you get a better sense of yourself. And of course, the trip is nice, but it's more like the insights that you gain on yourself. Because I never felt like, oh my God, the spirit world is teaching me something. No. It was more like I have all of these pieces of a puzzle in my head, and once I take the psychedelics, it's like after the fact, I can see the pattern of how these puzzle pieces fit together. It's that kind of experience. But I did coke a few times and weed, but very little. I mean, frankly, I haven't done any drug like that because it's like different personalities. That some personalities just get hooked like that, and others can take it or leave it. And so I take it that's your situation, that you feel that addiction, so you have to channel it in something more productive. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I had a brilliant therapist who was into neuroscience and Eastern philosophy, and he really schooled me and put a framework in my brain and circuit breakers in my brain, so that when certain temptations do arise or people offer you things, I just fall back on the things that he taught me, just to keep channeling that energy into positive stuff and be all about fitness and good health. In terms of psychedelics, then, I do believe that, mature people, adults should be able to do whatever they want without the government telling them what they can and cannot do. You've got all these prosecutors and judges who are pedophiles and smokers and drinkers and doing all these other things, locking kids up for smoking weed. It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
So adults should be able to do whatever they want to do. And, in measured quantities, psychedelics can definitely, open avenues in your mind to higher states of consciousness, which can permanently alter the way that you think. I've done mushrooms and various psychedelics, and I do believe they have changed my worldview. And if people can do that without becoming drug fiends, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And they're using them now for soldiers with PTSD. They're using ecstasy for soldiers with PTSD. I mean, when the ecstasy started to boom in the UK, it was in the late 1980s. There's this thing called the Summer of Love, when the raves are just spreading everywhere. And prior to that, the violence at the football matches, the soccer hooliganism was rife. And all these rival towns, they would kick off against each other. All of a sudden, these rave parties are attracting everybody from the rival towns. And the hooligans now are hugging each other, telling each other their life stories. And the violence.
And at the end, it's like, I love you, man. I really love you.
The violence really went down. So, these corrupt governments, the attitude towards drugs, I find it frightening. And it's all for profits. I mean, look, the US federal government to this day is maintaining weed as a Schedule I substance with no medicinal value whatsoever, more harmful than cocaine and crystal meth, which is absolutely ludicrous. But that's where the corporations want it to be. I've just been asked to do a talk at the Oxford Union on weed legalization, because the psychopathic leaders of this country have all took drugs, most of them probably, still locking people up.
Still do.
Still
look
do.
At Boris Johnson, for crying out loud.
Yeah. And the thing is, researching marijuana laws took me back to Harry Anslinger and the Pharmaceutical Societies of California. So the earliest laws at the state level, the Pharmaceutical Societies of California did not want people growing free medicine in their own backyards. And then you had all the industries competing against hemp, the DuPonts, the guy with all of his forests, the media guy with all Randolph Hearst, the cars, the petrochemical industries, the oil industries were all, and they didn't want this competitive product. So they put Harry Anslinger in charge, and he changed the name of it to marijuana to harness the racism of the day. And he was saying things like, the reason we've got to make this illegal is because black people will think they're as important as white people, and black people want to sleep with white women. And this guy was the drug czar for decades. And he said to every country in the world through the United Nations, if you don't sign up for this, America will not trade with you, or America will cut off your economic aid. So because of this racist bastard who introduced drug laws all over the world, we've got this mess now everywhere. And it's a huge salute to the American people for reversing this at the state level, because it's not the federal government. The American people have voted to legalize and decriminalize, and it's about time the bloody British people did the same, and we legalized and decriminalized it here. And all these kids who are having these seizures, including my little niece. So my little niece, when she was 1 year old, was diagnosed with leukemia. And God bless the nurses at Great Ormond Street Hospital, because they saved her. It took 2 years. My sister had to give up a job. She was living in and out of that hospital. And it really sent a shockwave through the family. But they saved this little baby. Over 10 years later, she's approaching puberty. And because of the chemotherapy, she has had seizures, and she's diagnosed as autistic. And she had a seizure the other month as she was walking through London and threw herself under a London bus.
Jesus.
Unfortunately, the bus driver, he slammed the brakes on just in time to save that little girl's life. Jesus. And the hell that she's been through, and these bastards, man, who she's having all these seizures because the big pharma's got her all these medicines. And my sister had to lobby for years to get her on the cannabis-based medicine, and her seizures now have gone down to hardly any. And these fucking psychopaths controlling these drug laws to prevent children from having seizures where they can go into a coma and die. It doesn't get more evil than that. And that just absolutely blows my mind that these fuckers can get away with it.
Yeah, and it's all about money. That's the worst part. They don't even believe the bullshit that they're spouting. It's just, a way for them to make money. And that's the thing I find so despicable. I had on Brian Berletic the other day. He runs a channel on geopolitics called The New Atlas. It's really great. And he was talking about some drug. I forget the specifics. Brian would be the man to talk about it. But basically, it was this. I think it was leukemia. That there was a new treatment such that it would essentially cure it. And the drug treatment, the actual cost of it was a few $100s, but they jacked it up to $250,000 just to milk the misery of people. And that's the thing that I find unconscionable, because you see, if I see you suffering, and I have this, a few dollars in my pocket that will ease your suffering, that will prevent, you from being homeless tonight or whatever, I'm happy to give it. But I'm not going to charge you $250,000 for something that will save your child. I couldn't live with myself. And yet these people do. And that's what leads me to conclude that these people are not just money grubbers, they're psychopathic. They have no sense of empathy towards another human being. I don't think that they even look at them as human beings. I think that they look at them as simply cattle to be milked and slaughtered in their endless wars. I don't know if that makes me, right wing or left wing. It's not an issue of right or left. It's an issue of humanity, of basic decency. And the society that we have constructed, this industrial society, which has given us so many benefits, let's not kid ourselves. Our industrial society has been very good to us in terms of raising up the level of comfort of all of humanity. But at the same time, we have to recognize that some of the abuses and extremism of this industrial society has caused immense suffering. And what is happening now is that it seems to me that we're getting to this point of decay of our industrial society. And the abuses are overwhelming the benefits, because now you have middle-class people saddled with debt, They're slinging lattes at the local Starbucks. They are terrified of getting sick because they don't know what will happen to them if they get sick. They have no possibility of having a family of their own, of a home of their own. I mean, it's abusing people across the board. And the worst part is that every day, every year, you see how the so-called middle class is slowly drifting down. The quality of life is impossible. Somebody pointed out to me something funny. You know, The Simpsons, the Simpsons TV show, right? The cartoon show. In the 90s, when it started I think in 93, it was perfectly reasonable for a family of 5 to live on one income in a very nice house. The house of the Simpsons was considered modest by the standards, very middle class. And now you look at it and it's aspirational. Think of it. Homer Simpson's life is what we aspire to at this point. That's how much we have decayed. And I look at the leadership class in not just the United States, but also in the UK, this cosmopolitan leadership class that has no loyalty to the people. And I despise every single one of them by definition, because all of them are equally corrupt. All of them, they only care about the opinion of their peers in this cosmopolitan class. They don't give a shit about the people that they are supposed to represent. I mean, that's the whole point of democracy, where you have these elected representatives of the people who serve at the leisure of the people and who are trying to do, or they're supposed to do, what is best for the people, but not for themselves. And that's what we've become. We have become colonized by our own leadership class. Sorry for ranting, man. I mean, like, I get on this hobby horse of the leadership class, man, and it just pisses the shit out of me. And I'll explain why. Without sounding like a complete asshole. I mean, I'm a semi-asshole, okay? Semi-conceited, not totally conceited. But I was raised to be a part of this leadership class. And for reasons of my own that I'm not going to get into, I recognize the corruption. I want no part of it. I just wanted to make my money and stay as far away as possible from that whole crowd, because they are money-grubbing lemmings who do what everybody else is doing. They never have any kind of independent judgment, and they never stop and say, is this something that we should be doing? Is this a course of action that is moral and decent? They never think that. They always think of, how profitable can it be? They are not purpose-driven. They are profit-driven. And they don't give a shit about the business that they're doing, whether it's good or bad for the people or for any other sector. They only care about how much money they can extract and run away. You see what I'm saying? I find it horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened recently is a classic example, the pandemic, never let a good crisis go to waste. And you're right about, left and right, Clinton and Bush, whoever gets to the top, you've got to be a psychopath. I mean, Hillary Clinton, she got a pedophile off in a court case and was cackling and gloating about it.
Yeah.
She found out who Bill Clinton was having affairs with when he was coked up as a governor of Arkansas, not to keep him away from those women, but to terrorize them. Pets were murdered. People were thrown off balconies. There was nothing going to stop their rise to power. Anyone who got in the way of that was going to get incinerated by Hillary Clinton. I mean, Bill Clinton, his half-brother Roger was arrested doing a coke deal. And the undercover cop listened to Roger say, yeah, some of this is for Bill. He's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner. And that undercover cop knew unless he got this out there fast, it would all get covered up and squashed by the Clinton crime family. He got it out there fast. So it is a documented case. And Bill was sentenced and eventually, Roger was sentenced and eventually pardoned. But the utter hypocrisy of Bill Clinton to keep this war on drugs going that Bush had handed over to him, and to lock up a record level of women. Hundreds of thousands of non-violent drug offenders, when this is a guy who shoved so much coke up his nose, he went to the hospital for nasal damage. And Hillary told,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
This is in my book. I think it's in American Made, Who Killed Barry Seal. That one, yeah, it's in that one. So she went to the hospital and said to the staff, "You will never work again a day in your lives if this gets out of this hospital." And a lot of the testimonies we've got for the research that we've done have come from people who were state security apparatus for Bill Clinton, who were so just absolutely disgusted by his behavior when he was the coke snorting, philandering governor of Arkansas. And that is why the CIA chose Arkansas to do the drug drops. They wanted the most corrupt governor out of all of the states. And it was because Bill Clinton played ball with George H.W. Bush and Oliver North and Felix Rodriguez to provide the state security apparatus for the federal drug drops. It was because he played ball that he got awarded the White House. And some of our information came from Larry Nichols, and he was part of ADFA, which was advertised as, Arkansas Development Finance Authority. We're going to create jobs for Arkansas. Such a great thing. But Larry Nichols, who was in the middle of the mix, said they were laundering tens of millions of dollars of cocaine money a month. It was arms to Nicaragua, cocaine on the flights back in. And if you wanted to get your hands into this money, the scam was this. You applied for a loan that you didn't have to pay back through ADFA. And guess which law firm the fee had to be paid to? Rose Law Firm would process your application for an ADFA loan. So you can get
Rose Law Firm was Hillary Clinton's law firm.
Absolutely.
And Vince Foster. And look what happened to poor Vince.
I did a whole, in my book, Clinton, Bush, and CIA Conspiracies, I think it is. Or it might be Who Killed Epstein. I did a whole chapter on the Clinton body count.
No, it's astronomical. I mean,
it's astronomical.
It's truly creepy. Because, I mean, like, when you look at some CEO of some big company, but a legitimate company, okay? As a CEO, it's inevitable that you're going to meet a huge number of people, that you're going to interact with a large number of people. If you have a company of, like, say, 10,000 employees, I'm just creating a hypothetical here. You're going to know all kinds of people from all different areas of life. How many died? Very few. It would be rather surprising. Okay, you're a lawyer. And a lawyer, of course, by definition, you're going to have even a larger swath of people that you're in touch with. But how many die? Again, very few. But you look at the Clinton family, and the body count is astronomical. You're not, wait, that doesn't square, man. Come on.
In Clinton, Bush, and CIA Conspiracies, I weave together the life stories of several characters. Linda Ives is one of them. Boys on the Tracks, I'll get to that in a second. Gary Webb is another one of them. And the lives...
Rick Ross who committed suicide with 2 bullets to the back of the head?
Yeah, Rick Ross is another one. The lives kind of intersect. So with Linda Ives then, Kevin Ives and Don Henry were going out in the woods. And we believe they came across the CIA drug drops into Arkansas, run by George H.W. Bush, protected by Clinton's state security apparatus. And they were killed because they either intercepted drugs or they saw something they shouldn't have seen. Now, their bodies were laid side by side on the railway tracks with some tarp put over them, and the train ran over them. So when the bodies were discovered, the medical examiners could see that the blood was not fresh, and they were suspicious right away. One of the boys' dads worked on the tracks, and he knew right away that something was amiss. So the Clintons had this medical examiner, Fahmy Malek, I think his name was, who had got Bill Clinton's mum out of a situation years earlier, a medical mispractice situation. I think someone had died or something had happened. And Fahmy Malek determined that these boys had smoken so much marijuana, they had gone into a psychedelic trance and fallen asleep side by side on the railway tracks. I mean, this was
all the time.
This was a medical examiner that would say things like, if someone had drowned, he'd say someone had drowned, and they'd have shotgun wounds to the head. He had a history of doing this kind of thing. But the tragedy here is the story of Linda Ives. She never ever got an explanation or any justice for what happened to her son. The prosecutor that was helping her, he was running a drug ring out of his court system, whereby he was allowing some dealers to deal and others would be put in jail. And this is how corrupt the whole system was there. And Linda Ives, she approached Bill Clinton at some of his speeches, and he just completely fobbed her off, never gave her any explanation. And this poor woman to this day is still campaigning for justice for the case of the boys on the tracks. And that's just one of the earlier hashtag Clinton body count situations, all the way up to Epstein. Epstein, that jail, 2 guards had never fallen asleep simultaneously in the history of that jail since its inception in the 1970s.
Yeah.
The cellmate, Nicholas Tartaglione, was taken out the night before. The cameras mysteriously stopped working. I mean, the stars are completely aligned. Now, Nicholas Tartaglione, he's reading my book, Who Killed Epstein. I've sent him a letter in the jail asking him what his thoughts are on this situation, because I'm trying to get a rundown. Because a couple of weeks before Epstein was completely suicided, Epstein did appear with injuries, and he told his lawyer that Tartaglione had attempted to do something to him. Mm-hmm. So Tartaglione, he was an ex-cop who murdered a bunch of people in a drug deal. I think they were buried under his brother's yard or something like that.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Now, he's up for the death penalty. So if he suddenly gets some kind of play in the legal system, we'll know there was some kind of quid pro quo there with him trying to facilitate Epstein's demise. Look at everybody else that was involved in the case. The guards, were the ones who were reprimanded, but everybody else involved in investigating this or governing this at the prison, they've all gone on to get promotions. So you can always tell by who gains what really happened.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you see this pattern repeating itself again and again, not just in criminal enterprises, but also in finance. You see it all the time, of some weird deal happening, and all of a sudden somebody winds up with a whole boatload of money. And you're like, hey, this wasn't on the up and up. This was just off the rails. Famously, for instance, before 9/11, a whole bunch of people got into the options markets, and they sold a lot of puts, basically short selling the various airlines and insurance companies. And wouldn't you know it, these bets were way out of the money. Out of the money, meaning that the likelihood of that event happening was just very, very small. Okay. And they made a shit ton of money. And you're like, they knew that this was coming. And what I found interesting is that so much of what happens today is there's this effort at suppression, number one. But what I've also noticed and realized is that there is an active campaign to push conspiracy theories so as to hide and obfuscate the actual nuggets of truth that would point to something nefarious going on. And like for instance, insofar as the 9/11 situation is concerned, I actually lived in Lower Manhattan, and I moved exactly 30 days before the event.
Wow.
My address there was 85 Pearl Street, apartment number 4. And it was a big loft downtown. It was great. It was great living and just a wonderful place to live. And I knew that area intimately because I would walk my dog every morning. And Tuesday mornings, which it was a Tuesday, that September 11th, they would have a farmer's market in the parking area right below the World Trade Center. And I would go there all the time. So I knew that area very well. And, everybody talks about Building 7, that it was a controlled demolition, blah, blah, blah. And if you've lived there and you see how close those buildings are to one another, and you realize that what appears on the TV screen is not dust, it's bricks, it's all kinds of, it's mass, a lot of mass. You're like, of course, it's, some of that shit fell on the other building, and that building, they're not built that sturdy because there's no earthquakes there or anything of the sort. So yeah, collapsed, no big deal. But all of the truther stuff started popping up, and there was no limit to it. And I realized that's disinformation, deliberately placed so as to hide other things like those trades I mentioned, like the testimony of some woman, of several people actually, who saw a group of Israeli movers who were in New Jersey watching as the whole thing was going down, and they were dancing in happiness. And it's become the Dancing Israelis meme, which was actually true. And, people knew about it beforehand, but they cover up all the clues with bullshit. And so whenever you start talking about this, people dismiss you as like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. And, they dismiss you. And that's the strategy that they've taken in so many things. And like what's going on here in Ukraine, for instance. I was in Kiev when the war started. I arrived by chance in Kiev the night before, on the 23rd of February, because I had to do some business in Kiev. And my assistant, who was here in Kharkov, called me up in the middle of the night, or 5:30 in the morning, and he said, the Russians are coming, like, holy shit, right? And so I started from my hotel room, I started, wandering around, and I was in a very nice hotel in the city center. And I could see there's no Russians around, of course, they were like 30 kilometers away. And I was in the same hotel as the press people, and the press people were reporting lies. I mean, blatant lies. And I was there and like, no, this isn't happening, what you're saying. And I would report on other things of like shootings, for instance, that were going on in the city center. And I would say, this is happening, and it's because of these weapons that the government is handing out willy-nilly to people. And they'd say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. And that's the brush that they paint you with. You report things that are accurate, that would give a completely different narrative spin on the bullshit that they're telling. And you're dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, and there's no way to get around it. They're effective. Let's put it that way. And it seems to me that this brilliant Western civilization that we've had is collapsing because of all these fucking lies, all this money-making corruption bullshit. Again, sorry for ranting, man.
No, this is fascinating. We've got to dive deeper into this 9/11 options trading, because this was my wake-up moment. Yeah. So going back to when I was a teenager, and I started trading the stock market, I was 16. I was trading options as a teenager during the Gulf War, Val Reef's gold mining options. Mm-hmm. And then when I came to America, I got the Series 7 stockbroker license. I got the branch manager license, and I also got the options license. So I had to sign all the options tickets for my branch. So I was an expert in options by the time of this 9/11 options trading. So just for the viewers then, because I'm going to get deeper into this. If a security moves, for example, 10%, like Walmart shares move 10%, an option on it might move 100%. So it's a geared investment. Now you can trade options both ways. So if you buy calls, you're trying to make money off an up move. If you buy puts, you're trying to make money off a down move. Now, there is an average daily trading volume on all securities that people watch to try and find anomalies. And in the week preceding 9/11, the put options, geared investments on the airlines going down, and a range of other companies as well that were going to get hit hard, the average daily trading volume started to go boom, 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 until it was such a multiple of what it should ordinarily have been that after 9/11, it was headline news, and you can still find these clips on YouTube. I think I've got them on one of my channels somewhere. There's a report saying this has to be terrorist insider trading. This is the only way this could have happened. We're going to trace these bastards and throw them in prison, and that'll be the end of it. And then all of a sudden, it completely disappeared out of the news. Now, roll on. Yeah, I think I was in the maximum security Madison Street jail in 2004.
You traded options. I forgot that. So you'd know about this, and you'd realize the significance of what I'm talking about.
I was in maximum security Madison Street jail in 2004, and my neighbor shoved a book under my door. It was Alice in Wonderland, 9/11, David Icke. And I was reading that book, and I was, for years I'd wondered what's happened to this options trading stuff. Why has it disappeared out of the news for months? It's never been uncovered. And all of a sudden, David Icke, he said that it was traced back to an investment bank, and one of the proprietors of it was ex-CIA. And since then, there's been tons of research into this, tons of articles have been put out about it. And what the feds did was everyone who had any knowledge or was involved in those trades was deputized by them, which means
that's convenient.
which means they had to tell the feds everything they knew about them. And then if they ever opened their lips about that information to anyone ever again, they would be thrown in prison.
Yeah.
So not only did the intelligence agencies know this was coming, they were profiting from it.
Yeah. That's basically seems to be the equation in that particular situation.
And on the back of that, we had Enron. And then Enron was my other wake-up call, because I was following the share price, the stock market price of Enron. And Kenneth Lay was the biggest contributor to the Bush family. He was flying around in Bush, giving Bush jets to fly around in.
Bush Jr.
And they were like this.
Yep.
And when he got nailed, when he got arrested, I said to my cellmate, because I was in prison at the time, I said, "This will never get to court."
No, he dropped dead of a heart attack. I mean, like, look, you see, those people who get offed, I have no sympathy for them. I'm like, I'll laugh about them. I mean, like, some innocent person who stumbles on something that they shouldn't have seen or whatnot, and they get harmed, that's a fucking tragedy as far as I'm concerned. But one of these bastards who gets it, there's no honor among thieves. You know what I'm saying? No sympathy whatsoever. I laugh my ass off. Kenneth Lay, yeah. And what was his name? Jeffrey, what's his name? The other guy, the McKinsey guy who worked at Enron, who was just so full of shit. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, that guy.
They were setting up.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
They were setting up all those investment schemes with these names like Raptor and all these like
Skilling, him. But there was also that Asian guy who got out ahead of it. He's a smart cookie because he got out ahead and nobody touched him. And I've never known if he had some deal, if he was, wired in somehow, if he was connected. And that's why he walked away. He skated away from that whole thing. He profited like crazy and just skated right off into the sunset.
Just like Epstein with Tower Financial. Hoffenberg took the fall, didn't he? And Epstein got a pass. I was about to interview Hoffenberg, and then he died. Yeah.
Shocker. Was he one of these bastards, or was he like an innocent? He doesn't sound like an innocent.
He was corrupt, but he took, he did his time, he did his crime, took responsibility, and he was exposing Epstein, and then he died.
And how old was he?
I don't know exactly.
Okay. The 50s, 60s, 70s?
He was up there. He was up there.
Oh, okay. He was up there. Well,
yeah, but look, Joseph Recurry wasn't up there. Joseph Recurry was a cop, a Florida cop in his early 50s in peak health. And he was investigating Epstein. And then he just died. But he said that he did not trust giving the information to his superiors that he'd accumulated from the Florida residence of Epstein. And he gave files to Mark Duggan, a cop who's ex-Florida cop who's on the run in Russia now, who we've spoke to. Mm-hmm. And his house was raided by the FBI. They took John Mark Duggan. They took copies of all those files. And there was it ended up majorly in the media. So the intelligence agencies obviously got copies of all that stuff, because people are still saying, Epstein had all these cameras. The survivors are talking about all the cameras. Wexler's house was installed with cameras before this all went down. Where are the tapes?
Oh, yeah. They're around. Somebody's got them. Somebody's using them. Somebody's using them.
Clinton's
the word I heard from some people who seem to be plugged in, I don't know if this is true or not, that one of the things that they hated about Trump was that he was smart enough never to have gotten caught on anything like this. That one of the reasons that they had this boner for Trump during his entire presidency was because they didn't have any kind of compromise on the guy. That he liked his overaged girls, he liked his 25-year-olds with, fake boobs and dyed blonde hair, but he didn't like the kiddies. And also what is incredibly ascertained is that when he found out that Epstein was hitting on some girl, like the daughter of some friend of his, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. I'm not a pro-Trump guy, by the way. I mean, I think that he's a fucking clown. But what I understand is that he skated away from this whole thing because he was just not interested in that kind of thing, and he really just fucking despised Epstein. And that's why so many people in the intelligence community, especially, hated Trump because they didn't have anything on him. Have you heard anything similar?
The CIA chose Clinton to go to the White House because they allowed the drug drops, and he was the most corrupt governor in the state that they could put in the White House.
Yeah,
that's how it works. If they've got something on you, they've got power over you. I mean, David Icke said that time and time again, and I don't know how what kind of details you can get into here, but he's talked about kids getting killed and filmed and raped and all that kind of stuff
shit.
and videoed and used over these people. But if they've got no moral code, they're psychopaths. They're in it for power. They just want to get to the as far as they can, advance as far as they can. Like you said earlier, we're all cattle to them. We're all disposable, including the children of the world. And exposing that as on my channel, I just realize now how strong the forces of evil are against anyone speaking out on this stuff. And power to you, man, with this channel, saying the things that you do, because I imagine with the kind of views you're getting, they're going to be coming for you soon as well. Like I said, I've been in the police station over this. I've had death threats. I've had people dox me, put my bank information online, home address online. It's been never ending. So I wish you all the best in your mission, man, because you are one brave soul, and certainly you are a spiritual warrior.
No, look, my thinking is, see, if they're after you and they hate you, then you're doing something right. That's my thinking. No, I got picked up by the SBU back in April, and I was incommunicado for a week. And the thing is, see, ultimately, my thinking of all these people is that a lot of times they're, how can I put it? They're perverted and they're evil, no question. But they're also kind of stupid. And they also don't quite understand human motivation precisely because they lack empathy. And so a lot of times when you realize that, you can get away with stuff if you understand how people actually behave. And the notion that most people, certainly not in the leadership class, unfortunately, but most normal people are fairly decent. And so, if you approach it that way, then you can get away with a lot. But you got to fight these fuckers with every ounce of energy that you've got. Because, look, my terror at this time, and this is going to sound like, what I've noticed is that these people, they always project. They always. Hello?
Just my camera battery. Keep going.
Oh, okay. You're there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I just got to change my battery.
Okay, no problem. Okay. So what I was saying is that, see, I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about your faith in humanity. There are good people out there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my terror at this time is that, see, these people project what is in their soul. They project outward to their enemy or their opposition. And regardless of what you think of Russia or Putin, okay, and Putin is, as ruthless as they come. That you don't get to be president of Russia for 20 odd years by being, squeaky clean. I mean, the guy's rough when he has to be, right? But they're scared of him because they can't really control him. They can't run him. See, Ukraine is a fabulously wealthy country in terms of natural resources, farmland. The human capital is astronomical. The people here are educated, hardworking, very decent. And yet Ukraine is one of the poorest countries in Europe before this conflict, by the way. And why is it? Because of the oligarchs. The oligarchs here suck out every last bit of marrow from this country and have left it this corrupt shell. And in Russia, they wanted to do the same thing. But Putin there's no other way to say it, he is an ethnic nationalist. He believes in Russia and the Russian people. And he pulled out the oligarchs, the cancer of the oligarchs. And the proof is in the pudding, because if you see the oligarchs who were in power back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when he came to power, and the oligarchs, quote unquote, today, well, the old crop is all gone. He got rid of them. And the ones who are in power now, they have a fraction of the power that they used to. I mean, they're rich men, but they're not really guys in charge of shit. And that's why Russia is extraordinarily successful, because he was able to rip off this cancer of oligarchy, which remained in Ukraine. And Ukraine is basically, it's like this rock that you pick it up and all kinds of ugly, wriggly things start moving around. You know, you've heard probably about the biolabs here. There are like 26 of them here. And they're nominally run by private companies connected to Hunter Biden, by the way. Hunter Biden has his fingers in a lot of that pie. And remember, 10% gets kicked back upstairs to the big guy, you know? I mean, it's all corrupt here in Ukraine. And that's the thing. That's the reason they hate Putin so much and want him gone, because they can't control him, okay? And what's happening now is that they're starting to talk about nuclear war, nuclear weapons, nuclear attacks. And it's because they themselves are thinking this. And they're projecting it to Putin, that Putin is going to use nuclear weapons. And he has no intention, because the Russians here in Ukraine are winning. Whatever you're hearing in the Western mass media, it's bullshit. The Russians are decisively winning, okay? And the Ukrainian soldiers are getting killed by an obscene number every day. And these famous offensives that happened over the last month, you know, it's credibly estimated that something like 30,000 men have been killed or incapacitated. 30,000 men in one go, you know? I mean, it's a catastrophe for Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, all these wives, mothers, children of all these soldiers dying for absolutely nothing except to continue the grift here in Ukraine. Okay, that's basically what's going on. And now these psychopaths in Washington and in London are talking about nuclear war. It's because they're thinking about it, because they're losing. They realize that they're losing, and they're thinking it, and they're contemplating the possibility of how they could do it. You know, this is evil. These people are fucking evil. And chat, you guys who are listening to me, you have to understand that your leadership doesn't want your well-being. They want to milk you and slaughter you, and they don't give a fuck about you. And that's the hard reality. And my thinking is that if we're lucky, you know, it's a war and it peters out and humanity more or less survives. But if not, these psychopaths might push the big red button and it's sayonara for all of us. And look, I mean, Shaun, you don't know me that well. I'm a fairly level-headed guy. But this kind of shit is real. We are closer to a nuclear war than any time since at least 62. And frankly, I think the danger now is higher than then, because at least in 62, both sides were fairly rational and understood that you had to compromise. But the people in leadership today, they don't understand the notion of compromising. All they understand is doubling down. It's like, you've probably seen this, of traders who get into some position and lose their shirts, and they double down and they keep on throwing good money after bad until it's all gone. That's what they're fucking doing, man. And I'm like, oh, again, sorry for ranting.
And I've got a story on that, because my neighbor just got back from Ukraine and he was in some situations that confirm exactly what you just said. But I've got to get going because I've got another interview coming up. I've got Mitch Smiley of Hard Intentions. He's going to come on my channel. But huge thank you, Gonzalo. I would love to come back anytime. It's a breath of fresh air to be able to come on your channel and say the things I can't say on my channel.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on.
Huge thank you.
I'm having an open house on Saturday where it's basically, I'm going to turn on the stream and just stream, and whoever shows up, shows up. I'd love for you to drop by, man. It would be great. If only for 5 minutes to say hi, because I have all kinds of people show up.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. And huge thank you to all the subscribers as well. My subscribers have gone up a couple of hundred on my YouTube since this. So huge thank you to everyone in the chat who subscribed, and really appreciate all of your love and support. Let's take these bastard NWO fuckers down. So yes. Good night, wherever you are in the world. Cheers, my friend. Take care.
All the best.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And chat, it's been a real pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hit me with a +1 if you enjoyed the show, because I had a hell of a good time talking with Shaun. And I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. And hit me with a +1 if you enjoyed the show, and hit me with a 0 if you didn't. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And on that high note, I'm going to call it an end to this stream. On Thursday, I'm having Syria Girl and Alex Thompson, and we're going to be talking about Syria and geopolitics and all kinds of nifty shit. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure. So, chat, know what's going on.